then I should have asked this in the beginning, but do you feel like there's a particular community that you focus with nutrition? I know garden is different, obviously, but was there a community that either you found that you fit most into or that found you, or was it kind of just anyone?
I find that LGBT people want to work with me, and I think that's really cool. And I identify as an LGBT person. I've had, trans clients, gay men, women, like, full spectrum of
Yeah.
people on the LGBT spectrum have been and I have or am currently working with. It tends to skew male. I think people often, sometimes just want to work with people that they identify with
Sure.
in some way. And so like I think that's probably why that is. But it isn't always the case. But some I'd say LGBT people, but still even, I've had many clients who aren't on the LGBT
They do
spectrum.
exist, the straight people.
The straights,
Yeah,
if we want to
the
call them.
cis
I have had,
straight.
yes.
I totally get that, right? Whether it was that you were going out and seeking that community or it found you, I feel like sometimes our niche kind of finds us and we find ourselves in those ways. And right, working with, I think, a community that has so much toxic messages around like fitness and body image all over the LGBTQ plus right spectrum. What have you noticed as common, or have you noticed kind of a common thread as it relates to, I think of like anxiety, depression, shame, body dysmorphia, like stuff like that. Like, is that kind of something you've noticed as common themes, or what are your thoughts around that?
Wow, that's I mean, I get to see people's I'm with them week after week, checking in with them. I get to see a lot of their health history and have
Sure.
conversations and build plans around a lot of that information. I think a trend that I certainly see probably is loneliness.
Mm.
Um, I think that's just like a lot of people who live alone, who I like can see like their screen time on their phones, or when I ask them to report the numbers, like probably on average probably 5 hours or more. Um, Probably self-reporting levels of anxiety or depression
Mm.
as being common threads. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
people, and I say this from like a place that I can also relate to, is this place of like wanting to like look good, to be seen and feel loved,
Sure. Sure.
like
Nothing's
coming
wrong with
here
that.
being like, help
Yeah.
me like look good. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I get where that's coming from though. It's from like a, like you could think of it maybe from like a vanity or sort of this
Sure.
hollow space, but it's not. I think I really see it as like people want to like be attractive and like,
Sure. And want
yeah.
to feel good, right? I think
Yeah.
that's I hear you. And even my own kind of path to fitness and health came from, I think, that initial looking good. And I was like, but I actually feel better here, right? And then that keeps it. Because I don't think you can just want to look good for forever. I think there has to be other things that come with that. Have you noticed with the clients you work with, maybe how nutrition informs their like anxiety or depression or loneliness in those ways as well? Like, what are your in relationships like as mental health or with their body?
It's a great question. I think in terms of one of the things that actually, just to even go back another question, I think the
Sure.
niche that I randomly seem to
Sure.
really excel in is older gay men.
Mm,
Yeah.
interesting. What's older? I should ask.
I guess maybe like 50, 60 plus,
Okay. Mm,
60 plus maybe.
sure.
I find those
Wow.
clients just like really, they really seem to, I mean, I've worked for the whole spectrum in terms of age, like 20s, like come college to,
Sure.
retirement types. But in my recent experience and my recent clients, I feel like where I've definitely especially seen like really positive reviews and where they've gotten a lot out of it has been sort of like 60 plus.
And have you noticed when your work starts with them that feeling of loneliness as well? Is that kind of where, yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's, because you're giving you're informing, it's not just like, when you work together and then it's like, oh, now you have something to think about when you're like, we eat
Yeah.
multiple times a day. And so when you're thinking about this, it's like you're trying to apply something you're learning and
Mhm.
make these changes. So it can feel like you're doing something, and
Mhm.
you are.
Yeah.
And it can feel good because sometimes when you're eating and you're
Sure.
feeding yourself, you can just be like, oh, I'm just doing this because I'm on autopilot.
Mhm.
I'm like not even
Yeah.
I'm
There's like a passivity almost involved in that, right? And you're right, like there is an engagement, I think, in food in this way. And the way you approach it, like I said, is not shame-based. It's not like, oh, he said don't put salsa on this thing, right? Or don't put ketchup. It's like, oh, it's interesting. I really like this. I feel conscientious about my involvement in food and presence, I think is kind of what you're describing.
Yeah, I think I've never actually summarized this, and I think this is the first time that this has been vocalized in this way. But there's like a presence or an engagement or like
Mhm.
a coming aliveness
Mhm.
around your meals. And people are reporting when they're talking, it's like, well, there's like an excitement. They're like, oh, I was building
Yep.
this thing and I was doing this, and almost like a level of pride with being like, look, showing me their food logs, and I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. And I could see how people make changes, and then they're feeling better. I don't. It's like, I'm sure as you see this probably with therapy too, is it's probably not just like one thing that ultimately ends up like tipping the scale. It's like once that there's like a motion or a momentum that starts,
Absolutely.
and this some people nutrition can be the thing that gets them emotion or momentum going. For other
Sure.
people, it can be other things, and then
Sure.
they find nutrition. But oftentimes with my clients, they're coming to me as this is the first thing that's going to start moving and changing.
Wow.
And then that wheel starts going. And then by the end of the program, I'm like, oh, so I feel like I'm talking to someone, a bit of a different person, or someone who's like,
Yeah.
I can tell is in a transformational.
Sure.